Well, this year marks the 250th year that, well, not that we became fully independent, because the American Revolution lasted longer than 1776, but when we officially declared our independence from England. And in case you don't know, for all you Bridgerton fans out there, that Queen Charlotte and King George is the King George that we declared our independence from. Yeah. Some people have mixed feelings about that. But in this part of our happy 250th birthday to America on Welcome to the Chat, we're going to go over a few different American symbols and what they mean. So today's episode is going to be the American flag, which doesn't seem like such a big deal to some people, but like, we have a whole flag day, guys. Like, this is a pretty big deal. And most people will sit there and say, hey, yeah, I learned about that in elementary school. Like, Betsy Ross made the first flag. Duh. It's not as easy as that sounds. In all reality, the first flag ever on this side of the pond was called the Grand Union flag. So it had the stripes that we have now, but the difference was it had the British Union Jack. So that's that lovely, like, well, you know, from the British flag with the red and the white and the blue. And that was to symbolize that we had the 13 colonies, but we still were tied to England, essentially. So that's where that came from. So we were actually flying that from late 1775. So flags weren't like a huge thing in the colonies. Like, we were just here and trying to establish life and stop eating people in Jamestown, but we'll get to that on a different day. So we've actually changed our flag 27 times. So that's a lot of do-overs. It's almost as many times as, like, we've had to change other important American things, like, you know, the Constitution and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so June 14th in 1777, the Second Continental Congress actually passed the flag resolution. And so this, according to history.com and the flag history website, the quote is that resolved that the flag of the United States be 13 stripes, alternate red and white, that the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue field, representing a new constellation. That's all it said. Didn't say put it in a circle or a straight line or a zigzag or a diagonal. There was nothing else. All they sat there and said was, for sure, we want the stripes, 13, because, you know, 13 colonies. And then we want the stars, so it looks like a new constellation because we're a new nation. Like, bam, in the stars, guys. But nothing else. And so there's the story, or the legend, as they say, of Betsy Ross. And in case you guys don't know, Betsy Ross is from Jersey. So when people sit there and say nothing good comes out of Jersey, hello, the flag. Pretty big deal if you're basing it off of Betsy Ross being the original designer. But she was the one who is credited with sewing the first American flag. Pretty much, she's born in Jersey, and she gets married, and her husband actually dies like 2 years after they got married. He joined the militia and died. Now, family history, they've passed down saying that it was due to like a gunpowder explosion, where like some historians are saying that it's more likely that he like succumbed to illness, because that was prevalent back in the time, and there was no evidence of him dying in some kind of explosion. Then again, it's not like they kept really good accident records back then, so for all we know, that part is still true. But it's said that after her husband died, roughly in the summer of 1776 and 1777, George Washington comes and pays her a visit and says, hey, we kind of made this resolution and we know we want this and that, but we don't really have anything else. All I know is I want 6 pointed stars. And Betsy Ross was like, hold up, guy. That is just too hard to cut out and sew. Like, we're just going to get, we should just do 5. 5 pointed stars is the best option. And that is kind of where people have some questions about whether or not she's actually the first person to truly design the flag, right? Because that was only brought and made out to the public in 1870 by her grandson, but the design wasn't fixed until after 1777, which would be after George Washington went to visit her, and they apparently had this conversation about the actual flag. So again, there's like this debate in history as to whether or not she really is the true designer of the flag. Other evidence cited in historical documents and in history.com as the source is that Charles Willson Peale's 1779 painting of the 1777 Battle of Princeton shows that the flag had 6 pointed stars, which is what George Washington wanted. And then there's receipts that show that the Pennsylvania State Navy Board paid Betsy Ross 15 pounds for sewing the ship's standards, so the flags that they were flying on the ships. And so that's roughly what people have used as like, yeah, no, totally, she was the woman behind the flag. But further historians have dove deeper into receipt tracking, apparently, and have found other receipts of Margaret Manning, who in 1775 was commissioned to create a flag or to sew a flag during the American Revolution. And then Cornelia Bridges also has receipts from 1776, and Rebecca Young as well, fun fact, her daughter goes on to sew a different version of the flag, Mary Pickersgill, and she sews the flag that ends up being the muse, if you will, or the inspiration for Francis Scott Key to write the national anthem. Crazy, right? And all this gives a brand new meaning to show the receipts. Quite literally. I mean, that's how we're verifying all this, historically speaking. But the idea was that they would create the stars in a circular pattern. It was 13 stars. And then the red stripes have always been meant to represent the blood that was bled by the soldiers who helped fight for our independence from England. In 1795, because there was no real rules to the flag, they just decided hey, as we add colonies or states, we'll just add stars and stripes, guys. 1795 we did that. We had 15 stars and 15 stripes, and that's when Vermont and Kentucky joined the Union. And that becomes one of the most famous flags, again, because it was the inspiration for Francis Scott Key to go ahead and write the national anthem. And it was flown in Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Maryland, September 8, 1814. So, September 1814. And then it stayed that way. And we started adding more states, and then we started adding more stripes and adding more stars. And then people were like, this doesn't make sense. All these stars and stuff, that's just too much. So then finally in 1818, we finalized the flag design and said, hey, we're just gonna add stars. Keep 13 stripes, 13 colonies, that's where we came from. But no. And so now we only add stars every 4th of July. So in 1912, President Taft finally makes an executive order, and that's what it is.